One spot is filled in Houston for the College Football Playoff National Championship. This is College Game Day Immediate Aftermath podcast from the Rose Bowl, another overtime classic in Pasadena. Rece Davis, Pete Thamel here. Michigan wins the Rose Bowl for the first time since January of '98 after the '97 season, which was also the last time the Wolverines won a national championship. They beat Alabama 27-20 in sort of a weird game. It was a slugfest. It wasn't like people were throwing haymakers at each other. It was like, Roman Greco wrestling with a lot of mistakes in the middle of it. But it was tough. It was intense, and then it was clutch, especially by Michigan on the final drive in the second half.
Let's be clear. Michigan earned this win, Rece. They out-SEC'd Alabama, plain and simple. When I think back 5 years from now in this game, I'm going to think of Mason Graham busting through that line, hauling down, I believe it was McClellan for the big TFL in overtime. And I don't know if I love the play call from Tommy Rece, and we can get into that on fourth in the game from the 3.
Oh, I can tell you that was not a good play call in my judgment.
But they ran right into a wall. It was plain and simple. That play didn't have a chance from Jump Street, and it showed a lack of intuition of what actually worked all day. Because I believe, we haven't seen a stat sheet yet officially, at least 6 sacks for Michigan.
Yes.
In just utter dominance. Talked to a couple of the assistant coaches at Michigan after the game and the scrum in front of the trophy presentation. They really credited Jesse Minter with an aggressive game plan. And we saw that early. I saw one play where 2 defensive backs blitzed from the same side. So there was creativity. Milroe never got comfortable. Michigan out-physicaled and Michigan out-coached Alabama.
There's no doubt about that, especially in the first half. It was a 3-point game, and that was a miracle because Michigan had dominated the game, but they made mistakes in special teams, and Alabama took advantage of them to keep it close. And to Alabama's credit, they gained a little footing in the second half, took the lead, and really had a chance to put the game away and had a chance to make a stop. But it would have felt like that they had stolen the game.
I would agree
because I think Michigan proved from the early part of the game that they're a more mature team. They're an older team, and they were the better team, and they got more consistent quarterback play. But to your point about the pressure from Jesse Minter, I felt as if the offensive line was confused on assignments. Milroe was confused and didn't recognize where pressure was coming from. They didn't get the ball out of the hands quickly enough, and they spent basically the entire first half confused, and then when they got down for the last play in overtime on the 4th down after the good throw from Milroe to Burton to get the completion, you kind of knew Michigan was going to come after them and dare them. That almost begged for something a little more creative, a little misdirection, a little trickeration type, which we saw from Michigan a few times over the course of the game. Whether it was a double pick on the first, the one touchdown to Corum, or they were very creative on both sides of the ball.
Watching the game from field level, I really felt like Michigan's misdirection was the key to their offense having success throughout the game. And watching from field level, I just sat there and was like, where's the ball? Where's the ball? And you could tell Alabama players were frozen. There was some carping about missed assignments and some, hey, where were you on that stuff. And give them credit, they did not really gash down through the teeth of Alabama in the first half. They worked the edges. I thought they broke a lot of tendencies, right? Like Blake Corum was not the pass catcher you would think, and he had 2 huge catches. One on that pick play where the tight ends went to one side and he flooded over by himself for I believe, Michigan's first touchdown. I felt like Michigan did a lot of things they hadn't done this year. One thing coaches always say about them is they'll put in a whole new run game that you haven't seen. And I felt like Alabama did a good job adjusting to that, but that allowed Michigan to get a hold of the game and control it in the first half.
And let's also give credit for because look, when you do the last play of the game, that's going to get a lot of attention. But the Blake Corum touchdown run in overtime. I mean, just an impressive display of skill and toughness. And look, sportscasters say things like this all the time: the want to, the desire, the refusal to be denied. And I can't really think of a more accurate way to describe the way he ran those last couple of carries in overtime.
So he didn't have as good of a year in 23 as he had in 22. He was coming off a severe knee injury, so obviously that's going to happen. Their O-line maybe took a tick back. There were a lot of factors. But one thing coaches had told me going into the game was Corum is just going to run what is blocked for him. And those coaches were wrong, because on that play, he clearly, it was not blocked for a 17-yard touchdown. It was blocked for 6 or 7 yards, and then you go down. And he twisted and turned and put his shoulders down. And when you're on the field level, you really feel that low center of gravity for Corum and how hard it is to get get around him. So yes, that to me, obviously that was probably the biggest touchdown of the game, and then the defensive stop at the end, and then Mason Graham just busting through the line. Like, there were just assertions of physical dominance by Michigan that I think defined this game.
And there was also bravery and, and courage in play calling. When Harbaugh went for it on 4th and 2 from inside his own 35, he had his timeouts left, but Will Reichert had been the MVP for Alabama's offense, knocking through 2 long field goals. And if you don't get that first down, you're basically in field goal range.
Yes.
And you have to use all your timeouts or it's a 2-possession game. And instead, they get the big game, which would have been bigger if not for the block in the back at the end. But it was, I think Fowler probably called it accurately. He said, push all the chips to the center of the table. Now, look, they had their 3 timeouts.
Sure.
They could have stopped him and made it been a long field goal, so maybe it wasn't the be-all, end-all. But at the moment, it felt like if they don't convert here, then Alabama's going to run 3 plays, get Reichert closer, and they're going to go up by 10, and it's going to be ball game.
Yeah.
And instead, Harbaugh trusted his guys, and they came up with yet another play, slipping Corum out, something that, confused Alabama's defenders and left a wide-open, easy throw for McCarthy to make.
It felt like whenever they needed a yard, needed a play, they did something completely unexpected.
Right.
And that's the highest compliment to them. Now, the reason why Alabama was still in the game is because the happiest person leaving the Rose Bowl tonight is Jay Harbaugh, who is one of the best special teams coaches in the country. Look at the metrics every year. I talk to all these coaches for opposing opponent previews. They praise Michigan special teams a plus. Michigan special teams tonight, self-destructed. There was obviously 2 fumbles on the punts. There was a missed field goals. It just was not a good night. And that's not necessarily on the coach because those are player execution errors. But ultimately, they had to have the pit in their stomach going into overtime. Even I actually watched the kicker exhale before the final extra point in overtime, and I could actually feel his shoulders drop on the sideline.
Yeah. That muffed punt at the end of regulation was right in front of where I was standing to get ready for the trophy ceremony. And I'm here to tell you that was a few inches away and milliseconds away from being recovered by Alabama either over on the 1-inch line or in the end zone for a touchdown. Now, people around me started yelling safety, but that you can't do that. The impetus of the ball carrying it in is not a safety. But
that was a wow moment.
Was disastrous. And he made a great play to get the ball back and to make sure that they didn't give the game away right there at the end. So when they get to the national championship game, there are plenty of things to clean up. But given Michigan's history in the college football playoff, and for us, those of us who really enjoy the history of the sport, Michigan's failure on this stage and the Rose Bowl specifically and generally the national championship type stages is well documented. The 1997 national championship was a shared one, which doesn't take away from it. It just means, there were sizable number of people who thought that Nebraska was a national champion. I think their last outright was 1948. That's almost unfathomable because Bo Schembechler had the long winless streak in bowls. He was 2-8 in Pasadena. Harbaugh had lost 6 in a row in bowl games, before winning this game tonight. So it was a cathartic win for Michigan people, not only because of Connor Stallions and the NCAA investigation and the Michigan versus everybody feel, but there's a generation of Michigan people who feel frustration on the grandest stages, and they came through now and have a chance to win a national championship.
No, I think that's really well said. I think Harbaugh's 1-6 in bowl games. Is that right?
Now 2.
Yeah, 2. And yes, obviously he entered 1-6.
Yes,
I should say. But just walking through the concourse here at the Rose Bowl, and the great parts of being at the Rose Bowl is you are among the people. You are not like in a hermetically sealed press box. You feel it, and you could, I just heard a guy yelling, "Bye, Nick!" like on the top of his lungs. You could definitely feel like this. It's not the first time, but for a generation of fans, it feels like the first time, and they are on the cusp. And I will be so bold as to say they will be favored to win the national title.
Right now, we're doing this in the immediate aftermath.
Correct.
And as you know, I've had a high regard for Michigan all year, preseason number 1.
Jim likes to point that out.
He does, and I appreciate that. But I need to see how the second game's played before I decide, because there were enough.
I'll take the hot takes.
There were enough flaws in that game tonight against a really a tough, hard-nosed, resilient, but probably a year away Alabama team that maybe Michigan should have handled them a little better. You know, I mean, I think you can make that argument. So, I don't want to take anything away from Alabama.
What did Michigan end up in passing? Do you know? I didn't have the ears in.
Yeah,
so.
I don't have it in front of me right now.
I would guess it was under 200 yards.
I think it was. They were over 300 in total offense for the game, but
222. Okay.
222. Okay,
right.
So McCarthy hadn't been over 150 yards in the last 4 games.
Yes.
So they had a few chunk plays, which is something that we pointed out in the various pregames, whether it's College Game Day or the pregame show for the Rose Bowl, that they hadn't had a lot of explosive plays, but they hadn't had negative ones, and they still were able to avoid negative plays tonight. But then they were able to mix in some chunk plays, both running and passing tonight. That was very helpful to them.
Yeah, I really think the 2 coordinators at Michigan, it was a masterclass tonight. There's no other way to say it. Sharon Moore, I think, set the tone for some of this aggression, right? That Ohio State game, he called a bold, aggressive game, and it kept Ohio State on their heels in Jim Harbaugh's absence. Tonight, they were super creative with their run game and being able to get to the edges. And again, when they needed to, they went up the middle. But I thought really in the first half on that first touchdown drive, they did a great job. They had a little pitch play that got them going for the first down. I thought that drive epitomized the great play calling for Michigan tonight.
Yeah, it's the one thing you can always say, even if Alabama is loose in different spots, they don't go down without kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
And the way they were dominated in the first half, and then to have the lead and come back, and then for Michigan not to tighten up, because when you've outplayed a team that badly and you're one play away from losing the game, they never tightened up, which I think is.
And they came out really tight, too.
Yeah.
J.J. McCarthy was near disastrous on the first play of the game.
Yeah.
And then after the first series.
He was trying to throw the ball away and almost threw an interception.
Yes. And then after the first series, they fumbled the punt.
Yeah.
So it's like, just 2 potentially catastrophic things. Now, the interception got overturned, and the muff punt ended in a field goal. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, but still,
no, you know what? No, it didn't. That was the McClellan touchdown. I think that was the early touchdown for Alabama.
And they went down. And really, that was the only offense Alabama mustered in the first half of significance. I think they had 1 long field goal, too.
Yeah.
So, it was really interesting because they came out super tight, and then they never retightened.
Yeah. Credit to Michigan going to the national championship game. So 1 spot is filled. And Pete, I think I'm bouncing out of here. So you'll be with the immediate aftermath and reaction of the Sugar Bowl because I have a red eye to catch.
I will be locked in. Paulo Uggetti and I will give you our first title game preview.
Yeah, my favorite part though of the trophy presentation was when I asked Jim about it, and just sort of wanted to get some fun and ask him who's got it better than you. And the first time he goes, I know the answer to that one. He had a lot of answers.
So did the crowd when he asked it, by the way. I felt that.
He had a lot of answers tonight, and he'll take some of those into Houston in the national championship game.